All right, this is part 2. Size description or full shape description. That's a goal of dimensioning. Clarity, we want to keep things nice and clear and organized. And position. We need to know the position of everything. We don't want to be redundant, but we want to get the dimensions down that fully describe the object. So I'm going to put one dimension down and kind of talk you through it. We focus, and I know this drawing isn't done, right? But I need to get to dimensioning so you can have a good strategy for that. So again, keep everything nice and light. Dimensioning you can darken as you go because they are thin and dark lines. They should start with the smallest or closest to the object dimensions first. So small dimensions, bigger, 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 right? Because you'll stack them, they'll have room. Now they do dimension this three-dimensional object, but that's so you know the size, right? They dimension it inappropriately. They break rules like that. We can never cross a dimension line like they've done there. So they break rules intentionally so you don't just copy those dimensions onto your drawing. You actually have to think about it. All right. So let me talk you through a dimension. I'm going to put this 1.9 dimension on. So typically, you put your extension lines first. That's an extension line. It's marking the spot that I am dimensioning. Notice there's a gap. Here's another extension line. There's a gap. Okay? So, extension lines are always solid. They never have breaks in them, and they gap from the point that they're actually marking. We organize our dimension lines to be a 1/2 inch away from the object, and then the next dimension line would be 3/8, 3/8, and 3/8 if you were stacking them. A stacked dimension is like this. Smaller dimensions inside, larger dimensions outside. So I put my 1/2 down. Notice that I didn't quite get the extension line all the way out there, but now I can slide my horizontal up, and I can start to put the dimension line. Notice I'm leaving myself lots of room for the text, okay? So extension lines typically go slightly past the dimension line. So that's an extension line, that's a dimension line. The dimension line hold the arrowheads and the dimension text, okay? The extension lines extend to the object. Okay, so 1/2 inch away, the next dimension out here would be, and I think I'll put an overall dimension on also, because that's always information that people need, and that would typically be 3/8 of an inch past. So I'm going to kind of just extend my extension lines out. Notice I'm measuring this. You should do that. 375. The first few ones you do, you should measure it so you get a feel for it. But then you can just approximate it. What I am looking for, though, is that it's consistent around the object. Okay? Again, leaving quite a bit of room for my dimensioning text. Extension lines come past. Notice I'm sharing an extension line. That's totally legal. Totally good to do, okay? Now, when you go to place your text, that text needs to have guidelines. So I'm actually going to measure out 1/8 of an inch from here, 125 to there. So that's 0.125 or 1/8 inch text, and I give myself a super light guideline. All text needs to have those guidelines. In goes my text at 1.90. I'll be looking at your lettering. It needs to be clean. Sometimes we include the unit, sometimes we don't. If the unit is in the title block, then we don't have to put the unit here. But every piece of text I put on, 0.125, I need to have guidelines. Super light, and then you can just leave them. Guidelines can stay. This is 4.12. Okay? And then if you wanted to, you can make your dimension lines come a little closer to it. That's clustering dimensions. I have them kind of stacked nicely. They're organized down here. I have the smaller dimension in first and the larger dimension. Extension lines can cross. So like, let's say I wanted to dimension this little distance here, right? So I want a gap, they can cross. It's going to come out here to a 1/2 inch. That's going to be out in here somewhere. And then maybe I'm dimensioning this piece, right? That dimension. There's no way arrowheads and text are going to fit inside, so you can pop those outside. Notice my arrows are long and skinny, long and skinny. Pull them out long, usually 3 times longer than they are wide. Okay, that one didn't get quite as long. This could be actually longer. I'm looking for all that kind of detail. The text could go in here. The 1/8 inch text, there looks like there's room. If you ever feel like you're jamming it, then there's not enough room. You got to move it somewhere else. This is close to being jammed in, but I think I'm going to get it in fairly comfortable. That dimension was 0.30. Okay? Again, starting with the small dimensions, if I wanted to do an overall, it's going to be out here, right? If I need to sneak in more, like a positioning dimension, there is a lot of planning that goes on when you're dimensioning. You need to plan it out first. It wouldn't hurt to make a sketch first of how you're going to dimension this to get it all on there. You're only doing one view, just the top view. You're not going to fully describe this entire object with just the top view. So really this is just practice. Practice in dimensioning and trying to get everything around the object that is of value. If something happens on one side that's the same as the other, you can write typical. So I'm going to add that to my 190. It has to be completely obvious, which this is. This is completely obvious that this and this, if I write typical here, then this is going to be the same. Same with this notch. When I dimension that, I can write typical, typical, same as this one over here. If it's not completely obvious, then you would have to dimension it, right? You'd have to make it clear. All right. There's a lot of do's and don'ts, but I'm going to write a T, Y, P, typical. T, Y, P, typical. That means the two sides are going to be the same. Saves you some dimensioning and time. Notice that I have these nice and dark. These are ready to go. I made them. Now I would have to get my visible lines